It's passing you by, like a movie you've seen before, like a road you've driven 1,000 times. Life. It's happening to you instead of you happening to it. Now you can stay in the back seat of your very own life. You can be a passenger, letting something else dictate where you're supposed to go. Or you can jump in the driver's seat and pedal down, find a new road with some new terrain, because your life, it's all yours for the taking. But you've got to find it. You've got to go get it. You've got to own it.
Well, welcome to week 3 of Own It. I am so glad you guys are with us this weekend, and we hope you've had an amazing weekend, and I am so glad that you guys are with us. I have loved this series. I don't know if you guys are like me, but there's moments in life that I just find myself kicking into cruise control and just moving forward, kind of like mindlessly going down the interstate of life or just drifting. And so this whole series has been about what happens when we just kick into cruise control, when we just start drifting. And what we're realizing is if we're not careful, we can kind of drift and cruise to some places that can get us in trouble. Places like middle school band. This was not a good season in my life, guys. I don't know why, but I somehow or another drifted into band. Has anyone in here either been in middle school band or had a child in middle school band? There's few places in this world as terrible as that. If you're a band teacher, either you're crazy strong or crazy, but either way, I respect you. I was a hyperactive little kid, and so they're like, hey, here's a giant noisemaker. Go sit in a class for an hour. And I'm like, this is a terrible life choice. It was a rough season. Middle school was not friendly to me. Also because I had those glasses, I don't know what I was thinking, but I realized shortly after that like the whole like personal appearance thing was always a weakness of mine, because I later thought in life, as I just continued to drift through how I appeared, that this would be a great way to find a wife. This is my fatty Maddie is kind of doing a Scooby-Doo Shaggy impression. My mom is looking at me like, what is wrong with my child right now? But believe it or not, I actually met my wife with this shaggy, long, hippie look going on, and it got worse, and I didn't realize it could get worse, but this is how much worse it got. I actually got hired to work at the church looking like this. I don't know what they were thinking, but when we drift, we can drift into some dangerous places. Like just the other day, I was in the bathroom getting ready, brushing my teeth, and I needed to trim my beard just a little bit. And I'm just kind of mindlessly trimming off some of the loose ends, and I didn't realize that the guard fell off. And have you ever just shaved 14 months of hard work off in one swipe? Guys, it was not a pretty moment in my house, and I'm not like a lumberjack like some of you guys. I mean, some of you guys are like lumberjacks. You look in the mirror and you're like, grow a beard, and you flex and it pops out. And I'm like, I'm jealous of you. I'm kind of like, that was 14 months of really hard work going down the drain. When we drift, we can get into some dangerous places. When we turn our brain off and just go, dangerous things can happen. Have you ever heard someone say, man, I don't know what happened to my marriage. It's like we just drifted apart. Or have you ever heard someone who talked about their kids and they're like, it seems like we're going, but we don't know each other. It's like ships passing in the night. I don't know who my kids are anymore. Or maybe you've drifted how I've drifted, where you kind of like drift towards the couch and you're like, just one episode. And then like 15 seasons later, you're like, does life still exist? Drifting in life is dangerous. Drifting in life is dangerous. And we've got to own it, or it will own us. Drifting in life is dangerous, and we've got to own our life, or it will own you, it will own us. And I love where we've been in this series. We're in week 1. Jason started us, and he just said we got to own the influence of our friends. We got to own how much they impact us, and their influence changes how we move forward. And I loved his line where he said there's a difference in being judgmental and using good judgment. There's a difference in being judgmental and using good judgment. We have to own how our friends influence us, because if we turn our brains off, they can influence us in some dangerous ways. And then last week, David really challenged me as he talked about, we have to own our relationship with God. We gotta own our chance and our opportunities to connect with him, because it's easy to kind of take God for granted. It's easy to say, oh, it's just church, check. Oh, it's just attending, check. Oh, it's just singing, check. But do we realize the opportunity that we have to come before God, to own a moment, to stand before him in awe and expectation that the God of the universe knows the hairs on our head? And I know for some of you that's a really small number, and I know for some of you it's a lot, but God knows the number of hairs on your head, and he loves you, and he likes you, and he wants to know you. Do we own that opportunity? This week we're talking about another thing that we gotta own, because if we don't own it, it will own us. And it is that little undertow in each of our lives, that little draw that lives in each of us, that if we cut loose and if we stop thinking, it will pull us, before we know it, towards selfishness. There is an undertow in each of us. There's an undertow in all of us towards selfishness, an undertow in all of us towards thinking about us first, me first, my wants first, what I care about first. Prime example, if you get a notification on your phone saying you've been tagged in a photo and you open your phone, what do you look for first? Your face. Every time someone shows me a photo, I look for me first. But here's the truth, selfie sticks didn't make us selfish. We've always been selfish. Selfishness lives in each and every one of us from the beginning of time. Think about the very first two humans, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve, they were given a perfect garden, a perfect home, a perfect place. There was no middle school bands, there was no awkward hair stages, there was no awkward glasses. It was a perfect reality. And so here they are in a perfect world, a perfect reality, a great relationship with God. And God says, I want to have a great relationship with you. But he knew to have a relationship, they had to have a choice. Because if you don't have a choice, you're a slave. He wanted sons and daughters. And so he said, to have a relationship, I got to give you the choice to not follow me, to not choose me. So he says, you can either choose to trust me, to follow me, to know me, or you can choose to think you know best and you know what's right. In your way, you can choose to selfishly do what you want to do. And so Adam and Eve had the choice. And Adam and Eve did what every one of us would have done eventually. Their selfishness won, and they chose their way. So from the very beginning of humanity, selfishness has been this tow, this undertow in each of us, drawing us, luring us, saying, you know what's best. You know what's right. You deserve that. Why can't you have? Why can't you go? Why can't you? Selfishness is in each of us. And I believe that this selfishness, this lure, is actually the root of all sin. I believe that selfishness is the root of all sin. Now, I have some friends who are like super smart, and I have some friends who are super wise, and so I was floating this idea by them, and they started coming up with like these really nuanced examples that maybe selfishness wasn't a part of. So just to keep them happy, selfishness is the root of almost all sins. Selfishness is the root of almost all sins. I really struggle to think of a sin that selfishness is not the root of. I mean, when I think about lust, it's selfish romance. When I think about greed, it's selfish money. When I think about pride, it's selfish identity. When I think about lying, it's selfish truth. When I think about gluttony, it's selfish food. Selfishness is this root to so much of the problems in our world, so many of the problems in us, so many of the sins that we find ourselves going towards. Selfishness lives in each of us, and selfishness is a big deal. One of the first pastors, he warns this church, one of the first churches in Rome. And he says, hey guys, there's a consequence, a fallout. There's something that happens because of our selfishness, our desire for sin, our brokenness. There's something that happens. And he actually says, for the wages, the consequences, the fallout, the effect of our sin or our selfishness is death. For the wages of sin is death. This selfish undertow in each of us leads each of us towards death. And there's actually two types of death it leads us towards. As we give way and we stop owning it and we drift towards selfishness, we experience death in two ways. We experience death with God and death with each other. Death with God and death with each other. Here's what I mean by that. Like, God is perfect and holy and good. And when we live imperfect, unholy, bad lives, a good God can't be with bad people. A holy God can't be with unholy people. So that relationship dies. And our relationship with each other, when we choose to let selfishness lead, lust kills intimacy. Greed kills contentment. Pride kills perspective. Lying kills trust. Gluttony, well, that just kills us in the end. Sin leads to death. Death with God, death with each other. And here's the thing, God loves us so much, he cares for us so much, he yearns for us so much that when he looked at us and he saw this death happening in both directions, he's like, that's not what I want. That's not what I desire. We gotta fix that. And so he gets together with everyone up in heaven. He's like, hey, how do we fix this? How do we restore life with us and with each other? How do we restore this? And so Jesus comes and he tells us why he came. In John 10:10, we read, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I, Jesus, have come so that they may have life and have it to the full. Jesus came so that we could have life. We could have life restored with God, life restored with each other, life restored with God, life restored with each other. And so here's two really amazing things that Jesus did with his life and ministry. Because of who Jesus is and how he lived and what he did, we have two incredible opportunities. See, Jesus, he made a way possible for life to be restored with God, and he modeled a way possible for life to be restored with each other. He made a way possible and he modeled a way. He made a way possible and he modeled a way so that we could experience life and life to the full. We could experience what it means to know God again, to be in relationship with him, to have that lifeline restored. And we could see a way of modeled of how to restore brokenness around us, broken relationships that selfishness destroys. And so my hope is that each and every one of us in this room will choose to accept the way that God made and follow the way that he modeled. What it means to accept the way that he made, well, it's football season, right? Is anybody excited about football getting started in a few weeks? We got a couple of fans in here. That's awesome. So preseason's going. So here's an analogy to think about. So let's say there's two players, and let's say they start their careers this year. They're rookies. They're both getting started. And let's say one of them plays every play, every game, every season, his entire career selfishly. And somehow or another, he's not fired. He's not kicked off the team. Somehow or another, they keep him around. But every play is selfishly oriented. Every play, he's just thinking out for him. He's looking for himself. He's doing what he wants and what he thinks is best. And sometimes he gets it right. Sometimes he screws it up. Sometimes he hurts the team. Sometimes he stumbles into doing something good. But selfishness drives every play he does. Now imagine there's another rookie. And this rookie starts, and somehow or another, he manages to play, every game, every season, his entire career perfectly. Perfectly. Every play, every game, every season, his entire career perfectly. And at the end of these two players' careers, it's time for the Hall of Fame induction. By this point, it would be obvious that the perfect player is the best player of all time. And that he has to go to the Hall of Fame. And so they plan a huge party, a huge recognition, the biggest party ever in the recognition of Hall of Fame players ever. And they're like, this is the greatest player of all time. And then this other player who has the same career length, but was selfish, they're sitting there going, we just gotta recognize how selfish this guy was and how terrible he was and how many times he screwed up the game and messed up the play and put himself before the team. Like, one is a hero, one is a joke. One has earned his way to the Hall of Fame. One has not earned his way to the Hall of Fame. He's earned to be laughed at. Now imagine, Jesus is that perfect player that as he is getting called into the Hall of Fame, what he did for us is he takes off his jersey and he walks to us, the imperfect player, and he says, go in my place. I've earned it. I want you to go experience it. I want you to know what that party's like. All you have to do is accept my jersey instead of yours. What does it mean to accept the way that Jesus made? What it means to accept the way that Jesus made it just means talking to Jesus and saying, hey, Jesus, I'm selfish. I've sinned. I've messed things up. Please forgive me. Forgive me. I accept you, what you've done, what you've earned. Thank you. What does it mean to accept the way that Jesus made? Jesus, I'm selfish. I've sinned. Please forgive me. I accept you. Thank you. My hope is that this weekend across all of our campuses, that there's people right now who's deciding for the first time to say, I can't earn it. I can't achieve it. I've already messed it up. I'm selfish. Jesus, I need the way you've made. And that they will pause and pray that prayer. Because when you accept the way that Jesus made, eternity changes. Eternity changes. Life is restored. So Jesus made a way that changes our eternity. But he also modeled a way. He also modeled a way that changes our reality. He modeled a way that if we choose to follow, if we choose to take steps in that direction, if we choose to trust that the way that he modeled is the best way, it changes our life. See, the way that Jesus modeled was serving. The way that Jesus modeled was serving. And here's what happens when we serve others. When we choose to serve others, we actually kill our selfishness. When we serve others, we kill our selfishness. We kill our selfishness before it kills us by serving. That desire in each of us to put us first, to make our ways, we choose our desires and our wants, and we put us first, that undertow that just messes us up so much, we kill that by serving, And Jesus, his whole life modeled this. I mean, one of the first writings telling us what he came to do was found in Mark. And so Mark actually says it this way: even the Son of Man, Jesus, came not to be served, but to serve others and to give his life as a ransom for many. Paul, one of the first pastors, wrote to a church talking about Jesus and kind of how he thought. And he said, hey, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourself. Don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his privileges. He took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human. And when he appeared in human form, he humbled himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's cross. The attitude of Christ, the reason he came was to serve. He modeled a way. And just to make sure that we didn't miss it, the four guys who wrote about Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they wrote to four different audiences. We call their letters the Gospels. They had four different agendas for each of their different audiences. And some of them include the same thing. Sometimes they write it in a different way because they have a different audience in mind. But it's fascinating to me that all four included the same statement that Jesus said. Matthew said it this way. He said, if you cling to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you will find it. Mark said, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of God, the good news, you will save it. Luke said, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake, you will save it. And then John continued and he said, those who love their life in this world will lose it. Those who care nothing for their life in this world will keep it for eternity. Basically, when we cling selfishly to the life we've been given, saying, this is mine, this is what I want, this is how I want it, I'm gonna put myself first, my desires first, my way first, me first. When we cling to it, we will ultimately find ourselves saying we lost it because selfishness brings death. But when we trust the way that Jesus modeled and we serve and we give and we put others first and we extend the life that God has entrusted to us, when we give it away, we actually find life. We find life. And so what is this extension? What does it mean to serve? What does it mean to actually put others first? I grew up listening to Andy Stanley down south, and I love how he defines serving. He said this extension, this serving, is seeing a need and meeting it. It's seeing something that needs to be done and doing it. What is this extension, this way that Jesus modeled? It's the simple posture, it's the simple awareness of, oh, there's a need. I'm gonna meet it. Oh, I see something that needs to be done. I'm gonna do it. I see a need, I meet it. I see something that needs to be done, I do it. I see a need, I meet it. I see something that needs to be done, I do it. Oh, they need help, I'm gonna help them. Oh, that could do that, I'm gonna do that for them. It's taking your focus off of you and saying, who else is in the room? What else is happening in my home? What's going on in my kid's life? What's happening at work this week? I wonder what's going on in my neighbor's world. It's taking your focus from you to them. And that simple move, that simple gesture, that simple transition of inwardly looking to outwardly focusing, that little gesture makes a huge, huge impact on the selfishness that lives in each of us. That simple trust of following the way that Jesus modeled, of killing our selfishness by serving, it changes us. And guys, we must kill our selfishness before selfishness kills us. We must kill our selfishness before selfishness kills us. Because the longer we cling and hold and tighten, the more damage we do to us and we do to others. But as we trust that the way that Jesus modeled is the right way, and we give and we extend and we see a need and we meet it and we see something that needs to be done and we do it, and we do that over and over and over. As we start giving and as we start trusting and as we start following, God says he actually does something incredibly beautiful. As we extend and we open up something that we've offered, he fills it with something. As we extend our lives, he puts something back in our lives. As we give our life, he actually gives back to our lives. And this giving, this serving actually grows us. As this serving of extending actually grows something deep in us. Serving grows us. Serving is not for them. Ultimately, it's for us. It changes us. It changes our lives as we trust Jesus with our lives. And that verse that says, if you cling to it, you lose it, but if you give it, you find it becomes true, because as you give your life, you find a true life. And what you find is the fruit of the Spirit. Jesus tells us that as we follow his way and we trust him, he grows in us the fruit of the Spirit. That he grows love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and gentleness and self-control. That as we serve others, love fills. As we give to others, kindness fills. As we extend ourselves, seeing a need and meeting it, patience fills. And here's what I love about the fruit of the Spirit, and I love that he called it the fruit of the Spirit. Trees don't eat fruit. They give it. So as we give, God gives more fruit for us to keep giving. We give, and God gives us more love to give. We give, and God gives more peace to give. We serve, and he gives more patience to serve. We serve, and he gives more kindness to serve. And that exchange changes the world. How would that type of change your life? Man, what would a little bit more love do in your home? What would a little bit more joy do in your marriage? How about a little bit more patience on your commutes? A little bit more gentleness with your kids? A little bit more self-control in your dating? How could serving, seeing a need and meeting it, and trusting that as you follow the way that Jesus modeled, that he grows that in us, how could that change your life? About 2 years ago, I had a guy email me and he said, hey, could we get together for coffee? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's get together for coffee. I love any excuse to drink coffee. And so we get together. And I didn't really know this guy. I'd seen him at church a couple of times. So we do like the pleasantries, you know, who are you, how many kids, what do you do for work, all that good stuff. And then as soon as the conversation turned real, he looked at me square in the face and he goes, Matt, I think I'm a sociopath. And I'm like, well, this just got super interesting. And I'm like, why do you think you're a sociopath? And I'm like, I've watched way too many Criminal Minds in my lifetime right now. This is kind of freaking me out a little bit. And I'm like, why do you think you're a sociopath? Like, do you have bodies in your backyard? Like, what are you thinking? And he goes, I do not care at all for other people. I do not empathize with their emotions at all. I don't understand why they feel anything. Prime example, my wife's father just died, and I don't understand why she's so upset. She should have saw it coming. He was old. And I'm like, well, it's kind of like her dad, and he just couldn't understand why his wife was upset that her father died. He had no room to connect relationally with other people. Well, I have a friend who's a therapist, so I called her, and I just was like, hey, I just had a guy told me he was a sociopath. What does that mean? And she goes, first of all, sociopaths don't know they're sociopaths, so he's not a sociopath. It's a mask. And I'm like, okay, good. So I'm safe? She's like, you're safe. I'm like, good. So through some just really amazing moments, this gentleman took some incredibly courageous steps and trusted God and went to counseling. A great Christian counselor who pointed him to Jesus and pointed him to trusting Jesus and to following Jesus and to modeling his life after Jesus. And through some just incredibly amazing moments of healing, of dealing with why he had that protective facade, he took the courageous step to obey, and he started to see the needs in his family. He started to look around at what was happening at work. He started to noticing the needs around him, and he started seeing a need and meeting it, seeing what needed to be done and doing it. He started to intentionally push himself to actually notice the world around him. And about 2 months ago, he came back to my office. It had been about 2 years since we had talked, and he just looked at me and he goes, Matt, this whole following Jesus thing, trusting Jesus, living life how Jesus invites us to live it, it's changed my marriage. It's changed my relationships with my kids. It's changed how I lead at work. It's changed everything. By following Jesus, I've healed in so many ways, and now I get to love in so many ways. And I about fell out of my seat at that point because I'm like, wait, this is the sociopath saying he's loving other people. But I was like, this is cool. Serving changed him. Trusting the way that Jesus invites us to live changed him. And what I love, one of the things he said that I loved was he said, I didn't feel like it. I just had to do it. I didn't feel like it. I just had to do it. I didn't feel like it. I just had to do it. And some of us need to stop praying that God changes our hearts and just start obeying. Some of us need to stop praying for God to show us opportunities and just open our eyes to what's in front of us. Because serving is just the simple posture of going from looking inward to looking outward and saying, oh, I see a need. I can meet that. Oh, I see something that needs to be done. I can do that. Oh, I see something that needs to be done. I can do that. Oh, I see a need that needs to be done. I can do that. Serving is that simple move of looking inwardly to looking outwardly, and it changes everything. Earlier, we looked at this verse, John 10:10, and I love this verse, and I love that Jesus came so that we could have life and have it to the full. But this sentence haunts me. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. The thief, Satan, evil, he comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Satan hates you. He hates me. He hates God. And the best way for him to hurt the Father is to hurt his kids. The best way to hurt the Father is to hurt his kids. And so he is doing everything he can to convince us to hold on to our selfishness, to justify why we shouldn't or couldn't, or we're not qualified, or we can't go there, or we don't know what we're doing, or we can't go there. That would be too financially risky, or man, I don't have that much time to give, or I don't know what to say. What if they ask me hard questions, or I just don't know if I can do that. He has a million different excuses that he is trying to feed us, to trick us with, to lie to us with, to convince ourselves to just stay selfish. And if that doesn't work, he'll say, okay, we'll serve those people, so you can keep hating these people. Keep serving there so you can keep being a jerk at home. Serve Thanksgiving meals so you can continue to hate your ex. And he will convince us, if he can't keep us completely selfish, to do just a little bit so we can hate a whole lot. He is doing everything he can to come up with reasons of why we can't. See a need and meet it. See what needs to be done and doing it. Why we can't follow the way that Jesus modeled. I love how Andy Stanley, he talked about how there's this moment that he was wrestling with who deserves to be served and who doesn't deserve to be served, and should they go there or should they not go there, and the list of excuses of why they shouldn't or couldn't. And he said he read this one passage that he's read 100 times. And it's a passage that if you've been around church, you probably have heard. It's the dinner that Jesus had with his 12 closest friends the night before he went to the cross that made a way possible for us to have life with God. And so at this dinner, Andy said he noticed a line that he had never noticed before. It said, going into the dinner, Jesus was full of knowledge, fully knew what was about to happen, fully knew that over the next 72 hours, what would happen with the cross, what would happen with his death, what would happen with his friends. He knew everything. And so sitting at that table that night with his 12 closest friends, he knew that Judas was gonna betray him. And he was gonna be the one who led him to a horrific murder. He knew that Peter was gonna deny him and stab him in the back. And he knew that these 10 guys were all gonna be cowards and let fear make them abandon him. And so fully knowing about the betrayer and the denier and the cowards, he sits down to dinner with them. And if I was Jesus, I would have been really tempted to have a coaching moment or an inspirational moment or just call him out moment. But what Jesus did was he continued to model a way that changes one life at a time. Instead of pointing a finger, or instead of saying why he can't, he walked over and he put a towel on and he knelt down and he washed their feet. He served his betrayer, he served his denier, and he served the cowards, because serving kills selfishness. Serving brings life to them and life to us. So my question for each of us this weekend, have you accepted the way that Jesus made? And then are you willing to follow the way that he modeled? We've been singing a song the last couple of weeks that when we first started singing it, I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I like songs that I can kind of close my eyes to and pick up on the words and just kind of sway with it and sing it. And this one, it's every verse is different, every chorus is different. It's like a modern hymn, and like you got to like read every line, and so like I can't really get into the song. So I've struggled with it. But over the last few weeks, I've grown to love it because the words are rich, and there's a theology to this song that it just changes us and it teaches us, and I've grown to love it. And so here's some of the lines for the song. The song's called So Will I, and I can see your heart in everything you've done, every part designed in a work of art called love. If you gladly chose surrender, so will I. I can see your heart in 8 billion different ways, every precious one, a child you died to save. If you gave your life to love them, so will I. When you think about what Jesus made possible for you, will you say, so will I? Accept that? When you think about the life that Jesus modeled, will you say, so will I? Follow that? If you want to talk to anybody about what it means to accept the way he made, we got folks waiting at our prayer corners. We got people waiting at Next Steps area at every location. If you want to take a step today to start seeing a need and meeting it, seeing something that needs to be done and doing it and putting service into practice right now, we got serve boards at every location. But my hope is that our hearts across every campus, across every gathering will be us saying, so will I. So will I accept the way that Jesus made, and so will I follow the way that he modeled, and that we will collectively kill selfishness and follow Jesus. Let's pray. Jesus, we love you, and we thank you, and we need you. Jesus, selfishness is real, and it is really dangerous. And God, I know that selfishness lives in me in a scary way. But God, I know that I want to accept the way that you made. And I want to follow the way that you modeled. And I want life with you for eternity, and I want a life with my friends and my family and my kids and my coworkers and the people I meet. I want life to the full. And I know that comes when I accept and when I follow. And Jesus, I know that there's people here today who's struggling to accept. And I pray they will. And I know that each of us at moments struggle to follow. And I pray that we will. Because God, we want to kill our selfishness. And we want the life that you offer. Life to the full. Jesus, thank you that you made a way and you modeled a way. May we accept it and may we follow it. And it's in your son's name we pray. Amen.